We know the corruption that's been going on with Pat Quinn and Rod Blagojevich. The only difference between Pat and Rod is the hair.
His pension proposals of Bruce Rauner, as well as his budget proposal, are as phony as a $3 bill.
Ouch, knockdown, drag-out fight. Where? In front of the Chicago Tribune editorial board. It was this afternoon. Governor Pat Quinn, his Republican opponent Bruce Rauner, go head-to-head, vying for the board's endorsement. The winner? Well, maybe we'll try and find out in a few weeks, or maybe explore it tonight, because tonight we're breaking down the hardest hits, the biggest jabs from one of the hottest races in this country. Good evening. Welcome to Politics Tonight. I'm Paul Lisnick, WGN-TV political analyst, and we always like when you join the conversation. Now, if you watched today's confrontation, I think I'll use that word, we carried it on CLTV in front of the Tribune editorial board, you might want to call in and tell us what you thought. And so the phone lines are open for you, 877-358-CLTV, 877-358-2588. Of course, if you just want to make a comment, ask a question, go put it on Facebook, Twitter, that's fine too. You just have to search out Politics Tonight. So just under 2 months to Election Day, it's getting ugly. Governor Pat Quinn and his Republican challenger Bruce Rauner faced off today in front of the Chicago Tribune editorial board. We heard about cronyism. Rod Blagojevich came up numerous times. The minimum wage, Bruce's billions, consequences. Can we make sense out of all of this? We're going to sure try. Joining me tonight, the Common Sense Caucus. What a perfect night for them. Kristen McQuarrie is over at the Tribune Tower. She was in that room today because she's part of the editorial Tribune board. She was asking the questions. I heard her voice all the way through it. And Eric Zorn joining us from the WGN newsroom tonight, also in that room today, a columnist for the Tribune. So welcome to both of you. Kristen, I'm going to come to you and just sort of find out. I know it's going to be a while before we get the endorsement, but just kind of off the top, were you impressed by either or both of them today in general?
I would say in general, yes. They both came out swinging. There were some people who left that room saying they had never seen or experienced a more feisty endorsement session than we saw today. They were both on their game. I would have to say, in terms of, scoring debate-wise, Pat Quinn probably held the floor more often. He filibustered a little bit. He was probably better at getting some of his positions across, but they both did pretty well, I would say.
And Eric, I know you've been in the room for many of these situations. First time this was aired on television, and I'm just curious. They were very contentious, lots of fighting today, and I'm just wondering, what effect do you think the cameras had? Were these guys quite aware that there was a viewing audience this time around?
Oh, I'm sure very aware. I'm sure they were prepared for that, and it was a great forum or debate. There's a lot of criticism that political debates these days have just become joint press conferences where one guy talks and the other guy talks, and this was a real scrap. And I would agree with Kristen that Quinn probably won on points. One reason that I think that's the case is that the public is just getting to know Bruce Rauner, and I thought that he overdid it with his sighing and his head shaking and when he would interrupt Quinn saying baloney, baloney. That he didn't look as gubernatorial, if I could say that word. We know Quinn. We know Quinn is kind of a shambling guy who raises his voice and is a little bit irascible. But Rauner I don't think he came off the way he wanted to today.
Well, clearly they both came in with a sheet full of lines, because you can always tell when a line is prepared for a situation or a debate like this. And for those people that weren't able to spend their morning watching this situation, we of course want to share some of that sound with you. And for me, I was very struck by the fact that you almost never heard the name Quinn without another name or two adjoining to it. Let's take a listen.
Pat Quinn has extended the policies of Rod Blagojevich. Pat Quinn, Rod Blagojevich, and Mike Madigan have got to go. You said you fixed IDOT and the Blagojevich criminals in 2010, and you held them over. You kept Blagojevich people. Right. You did overs from the Blagojevich administration. We know the corruption that's been going on with Pat Quinn and Rod Blagojevich. The only difference between Pat and Rod is the hair. Those guys are fundamentally the same. If you say that Rod Blagojevich was an honest person who always does the right thing after he was indicted on corruption charges.
Wow. Well, so Kristen, what impact did it have on you? You're somebody that's going to make this endorsement decision along with your colleagues. Were you impacted by this constant tie of Quinn to Blagojevich and often Madigan?
No. I think Quinn, Rauner actually misspoke a couple times. Quinn did not speak highly of Blagojevich after he was indicted, but he did stick with the governor after Tony Rezko was indicted, who was Blagojevich's chief fundraiser right up to Election Day. So, I mean, that's fair game for Rauner to remind voters that Quinn was in fact defending Blagojevich right until his reelection and up until his indictment. But to continue to tie him to Blagojevich 6 years later, I think was a stretch. Quinn has been his own governor. He has tried to undo some of the policies that Blagojevich put in place, and so it was a stretch, if you ask me.
Yeah, Chris, I like how you say he misspoke. I think that's just a deliberate deception when he says that he stood up for Blagojevich after Blagojevich was indicted. It was in 2006 that Quinn said those nice things about Blagojevich, and I do think that he still has to answer for those, because by 2006, as you point out, we did know that things were hinky with Rod Blagojevich, and Quinn was standing by him. The effort to tie those two men together, though, I think is insincere, because as we all know, the lieutenant governor position in Illinois is not a position of any power or authority. Quinn was not part of the Blagojevich administration. He was not a Blagojevich insider. They didn't like each other. And the only reason I think that Quinn said nice things about Blagojevich was because it was before that election in 2006, and Quinn wanted to keep his job.
Well, and by the way, I think there's a lot of truth to that. People do forget there was no love lost between Quinn and Blagojevich anyway. They didn't even talk to each other. But you know what? My sense of this is that the Blagojevich thing is kind of very yesterday when it comes to this election coming up. Let's talk about some of the substantive issues they address. One of the key things in this state, minimum wage. Pat Quinn has had that on the front burner. Bruce Rauner has gotten himself into a little trouble, and of course your Tribune colleagues had a little fun with that as they presented the question to Bruce Rauner, basically saying to him, hey, we followed your positions on this, all of them, and let's try and get it cleared up. Let's take a little bit to what these guys had to say about the minimum wage.
Right now, Illinois is not competitive. We are losing jobs. We are losing our economic base. Companies in Illinois are not competitive. One of the reasons is we have a higher minimum wage than the states around us.
This is a person who actually favors eliminating the minimum wage. He was caught red-handed calling for a cut in the minimum wage in Rock Island, and he over and over again he puts strings attached and conditions on raising the minimum wage. The facts are, I have helped raise the Illinois minimum wage twice in the past decade, and I'm going to do it again.
Eric, I got to come to you on this one because, to me, Pat Quinn wins on this point. He has always said just raise the minimum wage, no strings attached. It is overwhelmingly popular in this state. That minimum wage is going to go up at some point, no question about it. Maybe Bruce Rauner needs to stop fighting it and coming up with explanations of what I really meant.
Well, I think we caught Quinn there taking credit for a minimum wage hike during the Blagojevich administration, and so we can't have it both ways. I believe that Quinn was not part of the policy making during that administration. And Kristen, you can correct me if I got my timeline wrong on that. But yeah, clearly the minimum wage is an issue that polls well for the Democrats, and they're going to be hammering on it as they go forward. And Rauner has left himself wide open for criticism because he has said a bunch of different things about it as he's gone along. His position now seems to be fairly solidified that he's in favor of bringing the federal minimum wage up to Illinois' level, or he's in favor of raising the minimum wage in Illinois above the federal level if he can get it as part of a package of business reforms. That's a lot of words, a lot of commentary there, when really what Quinn is just driving is a simple Illinois needs a raise, and I think that, as a matter of politics, that's going to play better.
And Kristen, you were on the show last week with Eric, of course, our Common Sense Caucus. We talked about the minimum wage. You took the position of not favoring the minimum wage increase. So I want to ask you this question, because your position on this should be irrelevant to who gets the endorsement here. You do know it's popular in the state. What do you think of Bruce Rauner's point, which is you only get to raise it, basically if the feds raise it, it's not us raising it anyway. And secondly, a whole bunch of packages to be named later have to happen to raise it. Does that answer work for you?
It works for me because raising the federal minimum wage, the governor of Illinois is never going to have impact over what Congress is going to do. So that's kind of a moot point. But tying a minimum wage hike to further business reforms, I do agree with him. The state did not go far enough on workers' comp reform. Talk to any small business owner. They still pay higher workers' comp premiums in this state than they do everywhere else. You can still get hurt on the job, and it's very questionable what that injury was, and the state still bails you out. We didn't go far enough on workers' comp, and we didn't go far enough on tort reform and some of the lawsuit settlements that especially emanate out of Madison County, Illinois. So I do agree with Bruce Rauner that if you're going to put this extra pressure on businesses of raising the minimum wage, you need to reduce their costs in these two other ways. And he's not the only one saying that. chambers of commerce, the Republicans, the Democrats who even voted for workers' comp reform knew that they didn't go far enough. They kind of took a baby step. It has helped, but they're not done. They need to go back to the table.
Although, Kristen, he didn't clarify exactly what that package of reforms is, right? We don't. That's the issue with Rauner. We don't get the specifics. We just get the general. We're going to fix this by doing stuff.
I mean, he said further workers' comp reform, further tort reform. Business people know what that means.
Okay.
I don't think we could have pressed him for detail. We didn't. I don't think he's being cagey on that issue.
All right. I would agree with that. I would say that the lack of detail on that particular element of the minimum wage hike is not the problem. The problem that I hope we're going to get into here is Rauner's lack of detail about his major plans, his major economic plan for Illinois, which is he wants to roll back the income tax hike and he wants to freeze property taxes. And he says he can do all that while increasing spending for education and for public works. All right, and no one can figure out how that's going to happen. And those are good questions. And we did press him really hard on that today.
You know, so much of the Quinn argument has been Rauner's just plain too rich to be governor. Paul Vallis even literally made that statement just days ago. Did it come up today? You bet it did. We're going to let you hear about it, and we're going to get our Common Sense Caucus's reaction to it when we come back. Stay with us on Politics Tonight. And welcome back to Politics Tonight. We're talking about the appearance of Pat Quinn and Bruce Rauner before the Tribune editorial board today. We aired it here on CLTV. Maybe you missed it. We're showing you some clips. Joining me again to talk about this and today, the Common Sense Caucus. They're the perfect person to have. Tribune editorial board member Kristen McQuarrie. Not only was she there, she's going to be part of making the decision as to who gets the endorsement. She's with us tonight from Tribune Tower, and our good friend, Chicago Tribune columnist Eric Zorn here in our WGN studios. He, of course, was also in that room today. Although, Eric, you won't get to make a decision on who the endorsement goes to.
No, I won't. I will not be in those conversations.
Okay, but you will be having comments about this, including tomorrow. So, one of the arguments the Quinn campaign says is Bruce Rauner just plain too rich to be governor. I've asked Paul Vallis and others about that, and so did the Tribune editorial board. Here's how it got handled today.
Is he too financially successful to serve?
I think that his fortune has informed his policies of eliminating or reducing the minimum wage, policies that would harm workers, outsource jobs from Illinois and elsewhere to foreign countries. Those are the things that he's made a lot of money on.
Now he is spending his enormous wealth to try to convince us that it's not going to have a devastating impact. That's my point.
Too rich to be governor?
You know, if I had to answer,
yes or no?
no one's too rich to be governor.
So, Kristen, your colleagues pushed. They made sure we were going to get a yes or no out of Paul Vallis because he's the one that said he's too rich to be governor. Today he says no, he's not. But, Kristen, let me come to you and ask the question, which is, I actually think that is a good pivot for the Quinn campaign. Stop talking about him being rich and start talking about how wealth can, in this case does, inform policy.
Sure. I mean, they probably should have been doing that for the past 6 months. Instead, they've only been harping on his wealth, and I do think they're realizing that it doesn't resonate with people. Bruce Rauner did earn everything that he has. He is wealthy, we know that, and so I think you're right. I think it was a good point for the Quinn campaign to say, no, he's not too wealthy to be governor, but when you are this wealthy, it shapes your policies. And I mean, let's face it, it does not look good for a multimillionaire to be talking about, you know, raising the minimum wage, but only on conditions and changing his opinions. So I do think Quinn's campaign is right to kind of put that issue behind them.
Well, but Rauner hasn't put it behind him. He's the guy who's driving his 1992 VW microbus around town and wearing his $18 watch. He's sort of ostentatiously trying to portray himself as a common, everyday person, which he just isn't, and he doesn't sell himself that way. So, but basically, I agree with Kristen. I don't think this is going to be a deciding factor in people's vote, and so I think as a political issue, it's a loser.
All right, now we want to share some more clips. We want people to see this. And so today there was sort of an allegation that maybe Bruce Rauner doesn't have any plans. He doesn't know anything. Let's see how that played out.
I've been crystal clear on my agenda. Crystal clear.
Where on the Ileana Expressway?
That's one project out of many we need to do.
Where are you in same-sex marriage?
It's the law. I'm comfortable with the law. I do not support advocating changing the law.
Two key issues. You wouldn't tell us a position. So you're on the most important issue.
We have got to set a plan with specific goals and then go implement it.
Well, Kristen McQuarrie, there you go. We need a plan with goals and implement it. That's the answer.
He hasn't been terribly specific, but I'll just say that 4 years ago when Bill Brady ran, he basically ran same style, no specifics. He just talked about, cutting spending across the board without being specific at all. Bruce Rauner has at least put taxes on the table. He is talking about expanding the sales tax base. But I agree with you. Beyond that, he's talking about the same rhetoric that every candidate for the past 10 years has talked about. Closing corporate loopholes, which the legislature continues to reject, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, whatever that means. I mean, state government is much slimmer than it used to be. And he's just trying to get by without, I think, rattling too many cages and the unions and poking some, hive's nest that he doesn't need to. But you're absolutely right. He's not being specific on how he's going to deliver on all these promises.
By the way, Eric, Quinn had a moment today where he said, well, I did close the corporate loophole, signed a law just a couple of weeks ago. And of course, your colleagues looked at him and said, right, after the legislature passed something and had no idea what they even passed.
Yeah, that was another one of those great moments. If I can get back to this idea of no plan, the sentence that you had, you showed Mr. Rauner saying is the first sentence in my column tomorrow, and because I talk about the difference between a goal and a plan. Bruce Rauner has a lot of goals. He said he's been crystal clear about his agenda. He has been clear about his agenda, but he has not been clear about his plans. And again, and Quinn used the word arithmetic, threw the word arithmetic at him about 3 times, saying, your numbers don't add up. And the contrary view to that is that, well, the voters don't really care, that they are looking for a vision. They are not looking for a spreadsheet. And that may be enough for Bruce Rauner, because he is saying that he wants to cut taxes, he wants to freeze property taxes, he wants to increase spending for education, and he wants to increase spending for public works, and he can do it and still balance the budget. And people want to hear that, and they want to believe that a guy who's really good in business can get that done.
So, Kristen, let me just ask you as we work towards our end. So they did talk about pension and budgets and lots of other issues, property taxes, education. What does the Tribune editorial board do now? What's going to happen? How will the decision get made?
We won't meet about this endorsement probably for another 3 or 4 weeks. We don't just endorse in this race, obviously. You will see more video feed with the U.S. Senate race. We're bringing in House and Senate candidates. But what we'll do is sit down one afternoon, probably a month from now, and talk it out, debate it, go back and forth, take a vote, and then the endorsement will usually run the week before the election.
All right, we're going to keep an eye on this with you, all those races, as we continue with our Common Sense Kiss as the weeks go on. Kristen McQuarrie over at the Tribune, Eric Zorn here in WGN. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'll share some of my thoughts, my take on today's candidate's appearance for governor when we come back. Stay with us.